Good morning, and hope all is well. Hope you've had a good week, and maybe got a fun weekend planned this weekend. And we'll start kind of kick the weekend off today by finishing up the 74th Psalm. Most of you know by now that it bothers me to finish. I like to finish a psalm on Saturday and start a fresh one on Monday, but not even coming close this time. We'll finish today and we'll start into the 75th Psalm tomorrow morning. And so let's finish up again this psalm, a great psalm with a great lesson, I think, for us here in the end. This psalm, again, was written in response to Israel, most likely Babylon, coming in and destroying the temple and running roughshod, I guess, over Israel. And the people and the psalmist feeling that God had abandoned them, that God was had ignored them, and had allowed, or maybe even in their mind had even caused this calamity in their nation. And so the prayer breaks apart into three sections. We looked at the first section where Asaph lays out again his I hate to say complaint, but he's letting God know. Again, a great example for us that we can talk to God and let God know our concerns and what upsets us. And so the first 11 verses, that's exactly what he does. He opens it up right off the right at the beginning. Why have you cast off? Why have you left us alone? Why have you abandoned us, Lord? But then the beauty comes in this psalm is in verse 12, in the next six verses, where you can start verse 12 with the word but, in spite of everything that has happened, all the destruction, the feeling that you have abandoned us, I am going to continue to trust you. And so that's the next step in this prayer. The next lesson for us is that no matter the circumstance, no matter how bad it may appear, no matter how desperate things are, that we remember that we can trust God, that we can place our confidence in Him. And now in verse 18, we're going to see then kind of the final piece of Asaph's prayer, where he is going to express his concern. Express his concern for the well-being of the people. But not only that, for God's name. Again, remind you that it was a very normal thought process in that time, that if two nations went to battle and Nation A, we'll just do it that way, Nation A defeated Nation B, it wasn't just that Nation A's military leader was greater than Nation B, but there was a very prominent thought among people that if Nation A defeated Nation B, it was because Nation A's God was greater than the God of Nation B, and that what had really happened was that Nation A's God had defeated Nation B's God. And so one of the concerns here that Asaph issues is that because of the destruction, because of what has happened, that it's going to be a embarrassment against the name of God. He's going to express some very patriotic towards his nation who are suffering. Some very patriotic thoughts, along with some very spiritual thoughts. And again, that is that the enemy was making fun of or ridiculing the God of Israel, that would have allowed or couldn't stop this to happen, and so. I'm going to look quickly here then at how he expresses that. In verse 18, he says, "Remember this, that the enemy hath reproached, O Lord, and that the foolish people have blasphemed thy name." And so Asaph uses a little, maybe it tries to use a little psychology on God with that thought. Lord, you remember this. It wasn't just that they defeated us, but they have reproached you and they have blasphemed your name. And so Asaph is upset, not just that his nation has been defeated and been conquered, but that his God is being ridiculed. And I think that would should be a great motivator for the Church of Jesus Christ today, is that we remember that some, not even, again, Asaph was concerned because of the actions of the enemy. I would take that and move that a little bit this morning and say that the Church of Jesus Christ today needs to be concerned about how her own actions are causing reproach and causing others to ridicule the name of God, because they look at the powerless, empty church buildings, church people, Christians, and we bring shame on His marvelous name, and so Asaph is bothered by that. It disturbs him to know that again that his God's name is being ridiculed, and he goes on, says in verse 19, "O deliver not the soul of thy turtle dove under the multitude of the wicked, forget not the congregation of thy poor forever." And so what he's asking here is that God wouldn't allow the turtle dove, his turtle dove, or his love, or Israel, to be conquered forever. It's obviously too late to stop it from what has happened, but Asaph is praying that this won't be an ongoing thing, that they will be delivered from their captive. Verse 20, "Have respect unto the covenant, for the dark places of the earth are full of the habitations of cruelty." And so he reminds God that there was a covenant between God and Israel, and so he's asking God to, even though we have been defeated, do not allow us to remain in defeat. Verse 21, he goes on and says, "Oh, not let the oppressed return ashamed, let the poor and needy praise thy name." And so he, again, just is that whole thought of don't allow us to, they're mocking us right now, but don't allow that to continue. "Arise, O God, plead thine own cause. Remember how the foolish man reproacheth thee daily. Forget not the voice of thine enemies. The tumult of those that rise up against thee increaseth continually." And so one thing that stands out to me in those closing verses is what Asaph says. He says, plead to God. He says, plead thine own case. At the end of verse 22, he says, the foolish man reproacheth thee. Forget not the voice of thine enemies, those that rise up against thee. And so over and over in these last two verses, Asaph points out that the real battle is not the enemy versus Israel, that the real battle is the enemy, and again, I believe it's Babylon in this case, that the real enemy is coming not against Israel, but against God himself. And so Asaph is praying that God will, again, you notice that phrase, arise. And so that kind of fits the image. Again, to begin with, felt like Asaph was praying, feels like God has abandoned us. And here he says, get up. You know, you've been sitting down. Get up and defend your cause. They're reproaching you, your enemies, those that rise up against thee. And so Asaph is making this very personal and recognizing again that the battle is not against Israel, but the battle is against the God of Israel. And so this morning, as we come to the end of this great psalm, I believe there's a lot of lessons for us in this psalm. Again, we've talked once again about the need, the acceptability of going to God with our burdens, with our needs, and talking to God. Then we see his, even in spite, in the face of fear and failure, he continues to place his faith in God. And then in his final section, ultimately remembering that the battle is against the Lord himself, and he has a passion. He has a driving urge in him that what takes place in Israel, what goes on, would not be a slight against the name of God Himself, and so. I think that that's a great lesson for us today. Is that we pray that that our actions, that the actions of the church, that we don't bring put a mark against the name of God. And all of us have seen those kinds of stories in the newspaper. I'm not going to rehash them here and give the devil any joy. But we've all seen those newspaper and television stories of the failures that bring a scandal, slander against God's church, and ultimately against God's name. And that's what Asaph realizes, is that ultimately it's not against the church, it's not against an individual pastor or a deacon or a person, but ultimately it was an attack against God Himself. And so this morning, as we wrap up this psalm, let me use it as an encouragement to us to be very careful, to be very cautious, to be very defensive of the name of God. Growing up, some of you maybe, I don't know, but growing up, some of the worst fights I've ever seen was when somebody talked junk about somebody's mother. And that usually will get a pretty good fight going. We should be just a million times over, and I'm not saying go out and punch somebody in the throat, but we should be defensive of the glory and the honor of the name of God, and do everything we can to be sure and bring Him honor, and to realize that the attacks against us are ultimately attacks against God Himself. And so we can put our confidence in Him and pray for Him to intervene in those types of situations. All right. I hope I give you some guidance and some encouragement as we face difficult days and challenges to continue to place our trust in Him and to remember that we're on His side, He's on our side, and defend His name. All right, have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning.